Why does my mix fall apart when I make it louder? This is a quite common question, and finding the answer might actually be quite helpful even if you are not aiming for a loud master. So let's discuss. The first and most obvious reason for the mix falling apart is that you are using too much peak limiting. If you want your master to work well in a loudness normalized playback, like on Spotify or other streaming platforms, then there is not much advantage in going louder than -14 LUFS. It's much more important to have a well-balanced mix that sounds exciting with a good tonal balance and clear transients. But there are of course times when you want to have a louder master, and then the peak limiting can cause problems. And there are mainly 3 areas to look into when this happens. It's the limiter settings, it's the macro dynamics, and it's issues within the mix. So firstly, is the limiter set correctly? Can you minimize the limiter artifacts somehow? If there is pumping or loss of transients, then you might be able to find a more aggressive limiter setting, maybe with shorter look ahead or shorter release times. If there is distortion or clipping, then you can maybe increase the look ahead or make the limiter sound softer and cleaner in some other way. It can also be that the mix is very dynamic, with both quiet parts and loud parts. And if you are aiming for an integrated loudness of, say, -10 LUFS, which is loud but it's not insanely loud, then the loud parts of the song might still require way too much peak limiting. Mixes that are optimized for loudness, they tend to have a dynamic variation more in the form of intensity changes or changes in width or timbre, rather than big loudness differences. And this is mostly an arranging and mixing thing, but it's sometimes possible to address it using volume automation in mastering. But if you want to keep the natural dynamics of a mix, then it's often preferable to let the loudest parts of the song dictate how much peak limiting you can use, and then let the rest of the song be quieter than that. Then you can listen to when and how the limiter is sounding bad. Is it when specific instruments are playing or when certain frequency areas are prominent? This can point to issues within the mix. One example could be that the bass instruments have too much fundamentals and not enough harmonics. For example, if the kick drum needs the lower frequencies in order to be audible, then the limiter will usually begin sounding bad at lower amounts of limiting, compared to if the kick has a healthy amount of clarity higher up in the frequency area, like in the mids, and that the kick is audible and present even when the low end is missing. And this is also good for translation, because the kick will now be audible in smaller systems as well. And the same reasoning goes for any bass instrument. The clarity of bass instruments depends a lot on harmonics and transients above the bass area. You can also listen for large dynamic swings coming from certain elements in the mix. A VU meter can be good for spotting these. If the meter is making large movements at certain notes or when certain instruments are playing, then the limiter will probably struggle at those moments as well. So see if you can get to the root of this. It could be resonances or overly dynamic performances that need to be addressed somehow. A well-balanced mix that is optimized for loudness will usually have controlled dynamics without boominess or loud resonances. So those are a few things that can cause the limiter to sound bad. Like and subscribe if you want more mastering related videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.